one way to think about AI agent is LLMs like Claude Sonnet or OpenAI's ChatGPT tasked with achieving a certain objective. In the case of Inscribe, they have access to different fraud detectors. They also have access to the open web and databases like Secretary of State. So our agents use all this data to come up with better risk determinations about documents and customers. Hi everyone, I'm Conor Burke, CTO and co-founder at Inscribe.
Hi everyone, I'm Jon Fry, CEO and founder of Lendflow.
And I am your host, Brie Valesky. This is a live episode of Good Question, your favorite podcast about AI for fraud fighters and risk leaders from your friends at Inscribe. This episode is a little different. Like I mentioned, we have a live audience and we want your questions. So we're opening up the floor now. Drop your questions. And while folks are joining and getting set up in the chat, Conor, welcome back to the podcast. It's been a while since we've had you on.
Yeah, great to be back. And yeah, welcome everyone. Good to see some old and new faces. So looking forward to digging in.
Same here. And Jon, welcome to the podcast. In addition to being the CEO and founder at Lendflow, you are a great partner to Inscribe and a really insightful thought leader in the space. So we are so excited to have you here today.
Awesome to be here. Thanks for having me. And likewise, can't wait to dig in. AI agents I think, are going to be significant. I think that much is clear. We're already seeing some really nice impact from them internally and starting to see the really demand pick up from customers. I think it's been said that 2025 was going to be the year of the AI agent, and I think that's looking to be the truth. Some of the big areas that we've seen FIs adopt them so far, big four, probably number one is document categorization and extraction. That's been a big one. It's actually just labeling documents, something that simple actually takes a long time and adds human in the loop to the process that can actually extend out the onboarding process more than you would think. The second is AI communications. So that's voice, email, text, chat. How can you augment the onboarding process and also other human in the loop interactions that happen through that, like collecting documents that are missing or answering a question about the terms or something that an AI agent actually can be very, very good at. The third is data enrichment and augmentation.
Nice.
So that's helping to go in and bring in new sources of information that were more difficult to access before. And then augmenting the data that you already have. Maybe I'm structuring it differently or, consolidating many different services together in a more, a better formatted way or a better way.
Nice.
And then the fourth is AI semantic search. So that's maybe searching and finding loan applications or data with the natural language rather than having to build a bunch of filters. So that's been another big one.
I love that you bucketed into those four categories. Totally agree on document categorization and extraction. That is a huge use case for us at Inscribe. Obviously, we are using LLMs to better classify documents and accurately extract the data from them. And then I also love how you mentioned AI for comms. I was just chatting with a chief risk officer at a bank yesterday who mentioned that they're using LLMs like ChatGPT to actually write a lot of their education for their consumers about fraud and scams to be aware of. And I thought that was a really brilliant use case for them. Then also data augmentation and semantic search. I think there's a little bit that we'll dive into with our AI risk agent later on the call today. But Conor, I'd love to have your thoughts complement sort of Jon's foundation there. How would you describe an AI agent or what it can do?
Yeah, great question. There's definitely lots of different takes on what exactly an AI agent is. But one way to think about an AI agent is LLMs like Claude Sonnet or OpenAI's ChatGPT tasked with achieving a certain objective. So when you extend the capabilities of a large language model by giving them access to tools such as code interpreters, databases, web search, they can achieve much greater tasks than just a simple large language model on its own. And, in the case of Inscribe, they have access to different fraud detectors. They also have access to open web and databases like Secretary of State. So our agents use all this data to come up with better risk determinations about documents and customers. And what might be useful is maybe digging into a demo. A common question we get from customers is, how exactly does an AI agent review bank statements? And what specific, patterns or traits are they looking at? I'll jump into a quick example of what this looks like. So our agents have access to all of our detectors, and this particular detector is called the X-ray detector. So this is one of our customers' most beloved features, and it reveals hidden layers in a PDF that might occur when a fraudster is trying to conceal information and place new information on top. So in this case, we see that the applicant has changed their name and address, but has kept all the financial information the same. And this is a very common type of forgery we see in documents. Let's take a look at another example. So one of our newer detectors is actually our AI-generated document detector. So this is when the LLMs are actually being used by fraudsters to create fake documents by themselves. And this is a pattern we've seen become more popular in the last couple of weeks in particular. And in this case, our agents are able to flag this document or documents like this that are generated by tools such as OpenAI or any of these open source visual language models or image generation models. So in this case, it works by detecting different dictional signatures, patterns, image sizes that are commonly found with these tools. And while these, fake documents that we see here today, they're kind of easy to spot. We can see here, there's something definitely funny happening with this. Kind of looks like a word, but isn't really a word. But we're seeing the fake documents get more and more sophisticated every week. So if we extrapolate this over the next 6 months to a year, we definitely expect this to be a bigger problem. So we're spending a lot of time on this to help our customers defend against this type of fraud.
These are two of the many detectors that our AI agent can access. What's really cool is we have a combination of forensic detectors that look at the signals on the document, like X-ray that you saw. We have network detectors that look across our document database and determine if we've seen a specific document before, like a template. And then we also have these agentic detectors, which can use the reasoning of LLMs to corroborate different data points and uncover anomalies and inconsistencies. We got some amazing questions coming through the chat already, and I'm actually going to respond to one from Stanley here, who said, did I hear correctly that LLMs can be used to help train customers to avoid fraud? No, I'm sorry, Stanley. Let me clarify. The use case there was to use an LLM to help write educational articles about scams so that you can then send those articles to consumers to help them avoid fraud and scams. But Jon, you mentioned that your team is thinking about building AI agents both into your product, but I also know that you're using them internally. Could you tell us a little bit of like 1 to 2 use cases that you're thinking about it for your product, and then maybe a little behind the scenes with how your team is using agents?
Definitely. They're becoming quite ubiquitous throughout every department in the company, and it
Nice.
needs to be that way. It's a process of identifying when you can use an agent, when it's appropriate, and then having the wherewithal to go and build. And there's a bit of a learning curve there. And part of our job is to make that easier. So there's been a process internally of us doing that with our team. And as you go along, things accelerate and snowball. And now people are more and more empowered to go and solve problems and augment their abilities with these agents, which is really exciting and fun. And I think it's empowering for the team members who kind of make that adaptation and push that direction. How we're using it in the product, it's really the same process. Identify friction points, a human in the loop that's not necessary. And we really think of it like augmentation. And so it's things like we talked before, like I'm reaching out to a customer to collect a set of documents, or recognizing that there's a document missing and just proactively going and collecting that, or reading the information from a tax return or a check or whatever it may be. A human doesn't have to transcribe that information. It's querying and searching through a large amount of applications to find what you're looking for very, very quickly and easily. So those are some of the big ones. And we've done it all internally for a while now. And then we've really built that capability native within the product. So now our customers can go and build the same thing, because many lenders, everyone has the same friction points and the same challenges with onboarding customers efficiently for a loan, and particularly, an S&B loan. There's still a lot of friction in that process. And so, the thing that's, I think, really important when we're talking to our customers about this, it's you're not replacing the team that you have. You actually shouldn't change anything about how you're doing things. We look at it as that you're just adding a filter, so things are better packaged. And when they come to your team, it's going to be a lot more clean and prepared and ready, so they can do their job efficiently. Because where a lot of the inefficiency is, where they get something and it has to go back to the queue and go through, and then it gets stuck as different people evaluate as it goes through the process. And so things are better packaged, and the agents are just better preparing the documentation. Then when it gets to your team, they're much more efficient in closing out the process, and they can catch any mistakes that the AI agents make as well. And so I think that concept is really important. I think we're a pretty long way away from being able to trust an agent just to run autonomously or be fully agentic. Yeah, important to note that sometimes there's a little bit of a misconception there.
I love that. I think that's such a great point too, because we do have some questions in the chat. Paula's asking, how are FIs currently talking about AI agents' role in fighting financial crime? Are they cautious or optimistic? And I think the answer is both cautious and optimistic. But then also people are wondering, especially in lieu of Jamie Dimon's open letter about AI and banking, and just how do you manage integrating AI and AI agents into these business critical decision processes? I think what you called out there, Jon, that I thought was very helpful in terms of thinking about implementing AI is starting by looking at your highly manual processes that are causing a lot of friction for you or your customers. And you gave a lot of great examples there, Jon, like collecting documents. So when we talk about implementing AI, when we talk about implementing AI agents, we're not saying like suddenly layer all this AI in that's doing all the work and making all the decisions. You start small with like these highly manual processes. What tools or techniques can I layer in here to add some automation? You measure their results and then you iterate or expand. So we didn't go from, the Wright brothers playing independently, to just like planes flying mostly autonomously. There's sort of stages of autonomy that we'll go through with AI agents. And I think you guys would both agree we're at the very early stages of AI agents, even what they are and how people can adopt them. So thinking about adoption can be taken more in chunks, so to speak, as opposed to thinking about, oh, I've implemented this AI agent and suddenly everything is changing. But we've also got another really good question from the audience about how the AI agent actually does its own analysis. So does it use algorithmic factors to flag risks in a given data set? How does it weigh those risks? How can traditional rules and AI/ML rules complement one another? These are great questions. Conor, can you share a little bit about the research, reasoning, and summarization that our AI agents do, and maybe about how some of the AI and ML techniques work together?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, a real superpower of these large language models. So after our agent reviews all the signals flagged in a document and generates all the information, it'll provide a natural language summary of its findings, but also a risk score based on the specific data points and present it in a very easy to interpret way. As a practical example, I'll show you what this looks like within Inscribe. So behind the scenes, we use logistic regression to analyze a wide range of fraud signals, which will generate the fraud scores at a document level. And the purpose of this is to give teams the ability to quickly assess risk without having to comb through every single signal and every single data point. So in our last demo, I showed you what our agent provided at the document level, but here we're seeing what our agent can do at the customer level in a more holistic manner. So in this case, we can see that the AI fraud analyst has given this customer a high risk rating and also provides an explanation as to why. And in this case, the high risk rating is driven by multiple severe document fraud signals, but it's also identified some suspicious transaction patterns. So even though the person, the address, and the business are all legitimately connected and active, the agent has still determined that overall the customer is considered high risk. And if you want to dig deeper, we also have a more detailed fraud report that is already drafted and ready to provide a full explanation of what we found. And this can be exceptionally useful for audit purposes or referencing when you need to justify a decision that's been made maybe to other teams or a customer service team and so on.
I love the fraud report. And with any type of AI or specifically AI agents, transparency and explainability are so key. A couple of folks in the chat here are mentioning why are FIs hesitant to use AI agents? Are there compliance issues to ensure they adhere? There aren't regulations related to AI agents specifically right now, but it's definitely something we all have to keep an eye on. But I think another source of the hesitation comes from the fear of the AI being a black box. What is it doing? What is it looking at? How is it making those decisions? And so really with the stage of AI agents that we're at right now, especially with the fraud report you saw, they're mostly doing research and sort of that summarization. Another audience member in our chat, Jake, asked about investigation and triage. So it's a little bit of what we were showing you there is like it can do investigation. It can write up all of its findings. So you have that audit trail and that documentation, and exactly what the AI agent looked at and how it came to. Our agents don't make decisions, actually. We suggest recommendations, but for us, all our customers end up making the decisions in the end. So really, really great questions from the audience. Another question we have that is coming up that I am really excited to dig into, and we alluded to at the beginning of the conversation today, is can I talk to the AI agent before we jump into a demo? Jon, how often would you say you talk to an LLM or an AI agent?
It's pretty constant throughout the day, I would say. It's everything. This is after this, there's going to be my AI agent's going to give me a summary of this call, and I can chat with it and ask any questions about the call.
Yeah.
It'll prepare a follow-up to my team, maybe about. So it's just constant throughout the day. I'd say at least, I don't know, 30
Yeah.
times.
Oh,
At least, and
nice.
sometimes more. It depends on the task and the workflow that I'm in, what I'm trying to get done. It could be more, even more heavy than that. So it's quite often.
100%. I would agree. I'm not even sure I'm willing to publicly admit how many messages I send OpenAI on a daily basis. But on to our question, Connor, can someone talk to our AI risk agent?
Yes, we're getting there. So we actually just
Nice.
recently launched an early version of our new natural language search into beta, and you're getting a first look here today. So I'll share my screen and we can dig in and see what we get. So firstly, we built this feature to help fraud and risk analysts uncover trends, patterns, activity across all their data. So instead of spending time writing SQL queries or asking your data science team to help out, or maybe like manually digging through this data in a spreadsheet, you can simply just ask a question of the data that's already in Inscribe. So you can get answers back in seconds about a whole series of potential questions that you might have. So as an example, we talked a little bit earlier about AI generated documents in our first demo. As an example, let's say someone on your team asks you, how many AI generated documents have you received in the last couple of weeks, for example? How would you find that information? That's exactly the type of question we hope to be able to answer with this tool. As an example, we can see, so have there been any documents that were AI generated in the last 3 weeks? The language model is then going to convert this to SQL and then analyze all your data within your organization that's uploaded to Inscribe and then give you back an answer. So we can see here, based on the analysis, there was 5 examples of AI generated documents in the last 3 weeks. And we list these documents below. So you can really get super creative in the types of questions you ask here. But just for the purpose of a demo, I'll also ask another question here that we often hear our customers asking. Very simply, what is the most common document type marked as fraud signal this quarter? So if you're trying to understand, are there any trends in how fraud is occurring in your database, you don't need to go looking at any dashboards. You can simply just ask the question and it'll come back with a natural language answer.
Are there any other questions that we've gotten from the audience that we want to ask right now, Connor?
There's one more here that's very similar. So let me
Nice.
just copy and paste that one in. So along the similar lines, are there any specific fraud signals that we're seeing more of them now than we were 2 weeks ago? So let's just put this in again. The large language models are running behind the scenes. They're creating SQL queries. They're putting SQL queries against our database, and then we're coming back and summarizing that result in a natural language way. So you can see here that we revealed that there was multiple new fraud signals that were not present in the previous 2 weeks that were in the last 2 weeks. So edited text, fingerprinting, annotations were showing a much higher occurrence rate over the last 2 weeks specifically. So you can imagine if you're investigating a fraud case, maybe you have a population of customers that you know or you suspect are fraudulent, you could start asking questions here to try to break that down a little bit more and understand what patterns might be occurring within your database.
I know we're in the very early stages of this feature. It's still in beta, but I am personally very excited about it. And I know this is something a lot of our customers have been asked about. They want to talk to our agent and ask questions about their document fraud data, kind of like interacting with ChatGPT to better understand your fraud data. Super interesting. Jon, I would be curious to hear your thoughts on just like the ability to have natural language conversations with an agent. Like, how important do you think that is in terms of adoption of these AI agents?
I think it's very important, and I think it's going to transition. It's very text-based. I'm very curious how quickly it's going to just move to voice-based as well.
Ooh,
Especially when, yeah, exactly. Especially
yeah,
when the architecture comes through. I think we'll just be talking to our screens like I am now. It's faster, it's more efficient. And it'll get easier and easier because you'll just be able to build an orchestration layer to take all of the text and then define the right agent for the job. So maybe under that, the agent you're interacting with, underneath there may be 10 other agents. And some of
yeah.
those could be agentic and some could be for specific tasks and have many sub agents underneath them. Once that is all built for an organization or for a process or a workflow, you can just engage and the routing mechanism will determine where to go. It's just going to make
Wow.
it easier and easier over time. So I think that transitions happen pretty quickly. It is very exciting. I think you're going to see a lot of that come again, the year of the agent 2025. So it'd be very interesting to see.
I love that, the year of the agent. I'm just literally picturing like Jarvis in Iron Man, or like, Hal in Space
Totally.
Odyssey, just like talking to it. So it's an exciting future. But again, I understand why people have hesitations or concerns. It's a new technology. Of course, we have to understand its possibilities that are both constructive and destructive, and especially in, fintech and risk management space. So, all right, we've got about 5 minutes left. We are going to stay very close to our timing today. There's one more question from the audience that kind of summarizes a lot of the other questions too. People are just asking, like, how can you rely on the accuracy of the agent? How can you test it and ensure that bias and discrimination has not been accidentally baked in there? Conor, I'd love to start with you on this one.
Yeah, this is a great question. Again, with any new technology, it's really important to gain the trust of the users, and especially among other business units and stakeholders in a business. How we think about this at Inscribe is, one, making sure that the data and the evals that we're creating around these models are actually accurate and vetted. So, for example, if we're giving summaries of our fraud results or using information from the web, we need to make sure that we have some controls around that. So what good examples looks like. So we've seen sometimes you might have experiences with ChatGPT where it might hallucinate a bit or make some leaps that are just sound very convincing but are not quite right. How can you avoid that? So it's really important to have evals that kind of like punish that type of behavior a lot. So we've been spending a lot of time on that, and one of our kind of investments that we've made lately is into our kind of internal risk operations team. So we have fraud analysts internally at Inscribe, Dara and Jessica, who are on this call today, who really provide a counterweight to our agents. So they're like the human oracle of truth, and they've helped us stay on the straight and narrow in terms of what the agent is returning. But overall, it's an incredibly important issue. Just like security, with keeping our customers' data safe, we also need to keep our decisions accurate and trustworthy, and it's something we take very seriously.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned our internal risk operations team too. Just having that human oversight element is really critical when you're starting to think about adopting AI. You don't just set it up and let it be free. You start with small tests. You have, your internal human oversight. If you partner with a vendor like Inscribe or Lendflow, you're going to have a lot of support from their team in terms of oversight as well. So I think that's a really important factor to call out. Jon, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's exactly right. Evals are such an important part of the process, and the
Yeah.
feedback loop, right? The evals are going to be the test and make sure it's ready for in production. And when it is, that process needs to continue indefinitely. So you're constantly fine tuning over time. And the really powerful and cool thing about Inscribe is that crafting those great evals comes from experience and the prior data. So there's such a wealth of data and information a platform like Inscribe has, where they have all of the data to backtest against to build the evals. What in the past has been fraud and what has been missed? And Yuri asked a great question at track. Well, if you have human bias incorporated in the agent, then that bias still exists. You could always have a human create it and then have an agent build one based on historical data, backtest against it, and then see how they compare and try to weed out that bias. And that's an exercise we've done as well for, it really is the same exercise for everything. And building and crafting those evals is incredibly important, and just improving them over time. If you're building a voice agent, for example, well, you need to know all the different scenarios customers have, and you can build an agent to replicate those conversations a human would have, and run those and test those again and again and again and again until you make sure it's fine-tuned and super accurate, and it's battle tested based on real data. So incredibly, sometimes it can feel a bit tedious, and there's things to do to make it more efficient, but that's a really important part when we work with customers. And when you prepare your agents for production that you have to go through. So, yeah.
I love that. And when you think about implementing AI, you really do need to make sure you have diligence to select a trusted vendor, because anyone can probably build something with AI, but you want to make sure that it's built and maintained with a lot of responsibility and trust and security, which I can say with confidence you would be getting from both Inscribe and Lendflow. I could sit here and talk to you guys about this all day, but we are at time. As promised to all of our audience member, your special gift for attending today is some very unique and new Inscribe swag. We've dropped a merch link in the chat where you can visit our swag store and pick out your own very special gift, whether that's a Sherlock Bones, a Fraud Fighter t-shirt, or one of our other very nice branded items we have available. And while we are giving the audience time to grab their swag, any final thoughts from you, Conor or Jon?
Yeah, I think overall, we're just very early in this journey of figuring out like how LLMs and agents can actually help our kind of fraud teams, risk teams in general. And yeah, we're excited to be pushing the boundaries here. We're going to be experimenting a lot, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, and reacting quickly. So thanks for all the questions. Thanks everyone for joining today. We'll definitely keep you all updated. And thanks, Jon, as well, for all the insights here. It's been really great.
It's been a pleasure to be here. Yeah, exciting conversation, and we're looking to have forward to have more. So if anyone wants to reach out and talk about agents, Inscribe's been some of the most fun that we've had talking about these different concepts, and we'd love to do it as well. So feel free to reach out to me also for that.
Oh my gosh. Well, I can say ditto right back at you. Lendflow has also been the most fun and fascinating to have these conversations with. And thank you everyone so much for all the amazing questions in the chat. If we didn't get to them, we will try to follow up with you personally to give you a very thoughtful answer. You guys asked some really, really good questions. Great questions, I would say. We hope you laughed a little and learned a lot about how you can start thinking about using AI agents and your highly manual workflows. We might have to do another session to cover all these great questions you have, but we'll keep you updated on whether that happens. Otherwise, we hope everyone has a great day. Cheers all.